This is the Tornado Trackers podcast. The Tornado Trackers are storm chasers Jeremy Heyman, Jeff Mangum, and me, Gabe Cox.
Hey, I'm Jeremy.
I'm Gabe.
And I'm Jeff.
And we are the Tornado Trackers, and this is the Tornado Trackers podcast. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We've got a fabulous show ahead of us. If you don't know, this is a storm chasing podcast and a severe weather podcast. And what I like to say is it's a friendship podcast at the end of the day. Us Tornado Trackers guys are three best friends. We've been hanging out for almost 10 years, which is really wild to say. And we're making a podcast. We want to talk about weather. We text all day about weather. I don't know if you have friends who are like that, but we just talk about weather all day, and we thought we'd bring it to you guys here in a podcast format. So that's what we're doing, and it's pretty awesome. Gabe, I know that Weather Twitter, which is sometimes our friend, sometimes not, really spit up some gold this week. Oh man,
did it ever. So my life was changed this week in a really wonderful way. I discovered twcclassics.com, which is TWC standing for the Weather Channel. It's a website dedicated to all things retro Weather Channel. And my the main part of the site revolves around all of the music for the Local on the 8s, starting from the 1980s. And it's chills. Fantastic. Like it even has the intro voiceover, like your Local on the 8s on top of the music. Oh, and all recorded off of like really worn down VHS tape, so it's got that kind of pitch bend to it. It was wonderful. I think I listened to it for a few hours nonstop.
It's got that elevator vibe. It's got that elevator vibe.
Oh yeah, I tell you what, they had some solid hits on the Local on the 8s. They had Kenny G on there, some solid soundtracks from the 80s.
Yeah, the technical term I think is smooth jazz.
Smooth,
that's what it is.
Which is
some of the smoothest.
All of what jazz is without any sort of like the challenging artistic nature of jazz. It's just like grooves. I grew up in a household that listened to a lot of smooth jazz. I don't know if that tells you about me, but just grooves all day long.
But would that affect your love or hate of Local on the 8s?
I think I've come back around. Like that's the nostalgia loop. Like I think I went through like it's like the 5 stages of grief or something like that, but I'm through it. You know, some it's hatred to indifference to back to love, maybe.
That's good.
So yeah.
Well, it's good to have you back.
It's such a strong aesthetic, like 90s Weather Channel. They really went with kind of a look and a feel, and I really appreciate that. I'm sure a lot of our listeners could really get down to it too, because it's just those like getting your local weather from the Weather Channel on the 8s felt like something special.
There's some pretty sweaty jams on there, I gotta say. The titling too, some of the songs.
Yeah,
I want to meet the person who was in charge of picking these songs out, because I'm sure they had an interesting personality.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible. Yeah, lots of childhood memories. It always kind of felt special that like the Weather Channel was showing your weather or at least my weather in my local area, when it's like, no, that it was showing that everywhere. You know, like for a kid who grew up in Nebraska, it was like any attention felt good for my geography. So yeah, that's pretty special. Yeah, and I think in the future for our Patreon listeners, we're going to be kind of maybe integrating that website into some of our Patreon listens. So head on over to patreon.com/tornado trackers and sign up to get on to it's the third tier, right? That gets the bonus podcast episode.
That's right.
Yeah, and you can hear us talk more. So it's a little appetizer for y'all.
Watch the subscriber list just skyrocket because they just heard that.
Money bags, baby. Yeah.
Smooth jazz commentary.
Yeah, baby.
Honey, get my checkbook. Yeah. Well, sweet. Well, let me bring in our guest. So Nick Underwood is a West Virginia born, raised, and schooled aerospace engineer for NOAA's hurricane hunters. Nick has served as an aircrew member aboard NOAA's fleet of research aircraft supporting a number of science missions, including Arctic sea ice surveys, marine mammal surveys, atmospheric river reconnaissance, and our favorite, hurricane research and reconnaissance. To date, Nick has flown into, I think, 18 hurricanes. We'll have to get his latest tally there, across the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans, including Hurricanes Irma, Florence, and the monstrous Category 5 Hurricane Dorian. Nick is also pursuing a master's degree in physical oceanography at the University of South Florida, and he's passionate about sharing NOAA's mission of environmental stewardship, promoting hurricane awareness, and STEM education. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the podcast, the one and only Nick Underwood. Welcome to the show, Nick.
Hello, happy to be here.
Thanks for
Great
being
to have
here,
you,
man.
Yeah.
We were just chatting before we got on that we love Nick's Twitter. And Nick, your Twitter is at AstroNick, right?
At the AstroNick, yes, that's correct.
The AstroNick, that's right.
I think there's another run-of-the-mill AstroNick out there, so you've got to get the "the" in front of it.
Not the. Yeah, so whatever y'all are doing out there, pause the podcast or keep it playing and open up your Twitter app and follow Nick right away. I mean, he's just such a great communicator of and humorous communicator of all things hurricanes and everything that the hurricane hunters are doing at NOAA. Yeah, man, thank you so much again for being here. Something we love to ask people, and you may be a little different, I don't know, so I'll kind of ask this a little bit more open-endedly. Do you have an origin story, like a weather origin story? I know you're specifically in the area of, of aerospace and engineering, but do you have any memories of like weather as a kid that maybe kind of implanted a memory or stuck with you or kind of got you on this path?
Well, so what's funny is that, I'm certainly working in the weather community now, but it's not something that I ever planned to end up in. I certainly have always enjoyed thunderstorms, and I have like a lot of vivid memories of growing up in West Virginia and sort of, sitting out on the front porch with my grandpa and my mom and just, watching thunderstorms roll through at my grandparents' house. I'd say prior to my job, those were like, the most positive weather memories I had. I like everyone else have a lot of negative weather memories of, getting stuck in rain showers and that kind of stuff. But yeah, I never expected to end up on this specific career trajectory. But it's certainly been a wonderful thing to stumble into. My story of getting here to this job is sort of long and arduous, and I don't know if you want to hear the whole thing, but I'll leave that up to you guys.
Bring it.
Please. Yeah. Take us from A to B, because I mean, like, how do you become a hurricane hunter? I mean, I'm sure people want to know.
So there's a lot of ways to do it. I'd say I took maybe one of the more... I guess it's conventional or unconventional, depending on where you're standing. But anyway, so growing up in West Virginia, my goal since 8th grade has been to become an astronaut. And that's where the AstroNick comes from. And I saw my first rocket launch in 8th grade at Cape Canaveral, and I was like, I want to do that. I would like to do that, please.
Nice.
And so I studied aerospace engineering at West Virginia University. Go Mountaineers. And then my first job out of college, I was a flight test engineer for Naval Air Systems Command, which is sort of the civilian side of the Navy. So I was working with like F-18s and F-35s and doing all this cool stuff at Patuxent River Naval Air Station. And I wasn't like a huge fan of that job. I think as a lot of people end up finding their first job out of college. And I knew that I really liked working for the federal government, and I really liked, sort of serving my country, but in a civilian capacity and, doing what I can. And so I was looking to do something more science focused. And I had a very fateful Tuesday evening, actually about, it was 6 years ago yesterday. I got to go and meet a couple of astronauts and sort of, have some dinner and drinks with them. And I asked them, hey, what's the secret here? What's the trick that I need to know to get into this? And the advice I got was, don't sit behind a desk. And I thought, okay, well, that's a little tough to do as an engineer, but we'll see what we can make happen. And so about a year later, I was looking for a more science-focused job within the federal government. I applied at NASA, and then there was a open position at NOAA for an aerospace engineer, and I didn't know anything about what NOAA did with their airplanes, but I knew that it was science, and I knew that it was airplanes. So I said, well, we're going to toss our name in the hat here. And ultimately, I got offered both jobs, and obviously, a space person, you would think, oh, they're going to go with a NASA job, of course. But in that moment of sort of having to decide between those two engineering jobs, I remembered that bit of advice of don't sit behind a desk. And I looked at the NOAA job and looked and saw, oh, well, at least part of this, I'm in a hurricane behind a desk, which has got to count for something. So that is how I ended up getting into my current position with the hurricane hunters.
That's fabulous.
And it's funny because when I interviewed for the job, they were like, yeah, it's, severe weather reconnaissance and all this other stuff with airplanes. And I was like, yeah, great. Engineering, airplanes, love it. And then after I got off for the job, I called my supervisor at the time again. And I was like, so what exactly have I signed up for here? Just to really, flesh that one out. And it turns out that was, the best decision I've really made so far. So sorry to eat up about 5 minutes of the time there.
Perfect.
But that's great. That's a great story. What was the first year that you started flying missions? 2016
is when I started. So it'll be 5 years this fall. And Hurricane Matthew was my first hurricane. It was the first one I got to fly through. I wasn't a full-up crew member at the time. I was just an observer, but I still got to go on. I think it was a Miss Piggy flight. I got to go on Miss Piggy, fly through Matthew. Worst 8 hours of my life.
Oh my gosh!
That was, for people who don't know, Matthew was a pretty substantial hurricane.
It was a Category 4 at the time when I went up, and I was not mentally nor physically prepared for what I was about to go through. And so the first 2 hours were fine, and then the subsequent 6 were just me having a rough time being sick.
Oh, no.
But we landed back, and I thought, hey, that was honestly pretty great outside of the sickness stuff, so I'd like to keep doing this.
So the sickness has gone away, I'm assuming.
Oh, yeah. I mean, especially, flying with folks who have done this for years and years and years. They know all the tricks of the trade, which really aren't, too complicated tricks. Being well rested is number one. You definitely want a good night's sleep. I always like to have a full stomach when I go on the flight because there's less space for that stomach acid to slosh around. And so I'm usually eating throughout the flight. I always have snacks with me and stuff. But, just not moving your head certain ways and that kind of stuff. But we got a great crew.
Wow. And for folks who maybe for whatever reason don't know who the hunters are and what they do and what y'all do, who are the hurricane hunters? What kind of is their history, and what would you say is their mission?
Who are we? I won't go too much into the history, partly because I've only been around for about 5 years, and a lot of that stuff is very Googleable. But the sort of standard boilerplate, elevator pitch about who we are and what we do is that we are NOAA's Aircraft Operations Center based out of Lakeland, Florida, and we operate numerous aircraft to support all kinds of atmospheric and oceanographic research across the United States and beyond. One of those primary missions is hurricane research and reconnaissance, in which we use two propeller aircraft, our WP-3D Orions, which were specially made for NOAA in the mid-1970s, and we fly those aircraft directly into tropical storms and hurricanes in order to gather life-saving atmospheric and oceanographic data. And so the spaghetti plot models that you see on TV of the 50 different tracks a storm can take, the data that feeds those models comes from our aircraft. And not just Kermit and Miss Piggy, which are our two P-3s, but we also have a Gulfstream 4 Gonzo, which is our high-altitude hurricane surveillance jet. So while Kermit and Miss Piggy are flying between 8,000 to 10,000 feet, way low inside of the hurricane, Gonzo is up at 45,000 feet in front of, above, and around the storm, getting all of that high altitude data that ends up really steering where those storms go.
Wow.
And so it's a big team of folks at our office. We've got about 115 people, and that includes pilots and navigators and engineers and electronics technicians and mechanics and all of the ground support folks and meteorologists, of course. We've got a handful of those. They come in handy. But all of these people working together to make sure that we execute those missions safely and effectively.
That's great. Yeah, I think it's so helpful to realize and to hear you say that, no, we need to go into the storm to get the data so that then these models can run. Because I think it's easy to just think like, oh, these things just come to us. These forecasts just come to us. Like no, y'all are putting, your bodies on the line. I imagine it's relatively safe, but you're getting out into the storm and delivering that data. That's awesome
there's risk involved with it, but we do everything we can to operate as safely as possible. We take excellent care of the aircraft. Everyone on board is trained in emergency procedures and trained to do their job to make sure that everybody gets home safely after an effective mission. That's our role, because these storms form deep out over the ocean where we don't have radars and we don't have other weather sensing instruments, and so these aircraft sort of serve as the platform to get those instruments to the storm, so that we can get that data to predict the storms, just like we do with storms that are working their way across the Midwest or wherever else.
Yeah, what's a typical amount of time it takes when the storms form and they're really removed from land? What's I'm sure it varies, but what's a typical day look like for you in that?
Let's take, for example, a storm like, let's say Laura last year was a great example. So, we're always watching the models. You're watching the long range forecast models to see when something's going to pop up. And eventually, the folks at the National Hurricane Center, or the folks just at the Hurricane Research Division, will make the call of, hey, we want to go fly this storm. The research folks, obviously, if a storm's not going to threaten land, they a lot of the time still want to fly it because it still has research value. And then if something looks like it's going to head towards land, then the National Hurricane Center is very interested in flying that storm. So with Laura last year, we forward deployed out to St. Croix, and our first mission was actually into Tropical Depression 13. So it wasn't even a tropical storm at the time. We did find it as a tropical storm that day. That was one of the things we did. And typically a mission on the P-3 is about 8 hours in length, and that's usually about an hour to an hour and a half of transit time out to the storm, several hours flying in and out, crisscrossing, zigzagging all over the place, just getting data on all quadrants of the storm, and then a transit back. And my role on those flights is to launch dropsondes, which are pretty much weather balloons in reverse. And my girlfriend is going to listen to this later and say, you always say that line. And I'm going to say it's because it's true.
It's true.
So they're weather balloons in reverse. So we launch these instruments from the bottom of the aircraft, and they've got a parachute that deploys. And as they're falling down, they're collecting temperature, pressure, humidity, wind speed, and wind direction data. And a radio transmitter sends all of that data back to the aircraft, where I help to make sure that we're collecting the data that we need. And then once that sonde has finished collecting data for us, we send the data to the National Hurricane Center, and they can do whatever magic they do with it. And so like I said, we'll forward deploy to hunt a storm even before they form sometimes. And then so long as it either has research value or it is threatening life and property, we will continue to fly that storm until it makes landfall. Because at that point, when it's close to land, we've done what we can. We've got land-based radars and weather stations and all of that kind of stuff. So,
and you've flown through some significant hurricanes, including Dorian, which we mentioned at the top was a Category 5. Can you explain to us what it's like to punch through the eye wall of a hurricane like that and come into the clear of the eye?
Right. So for Dorian, I didn't actually fly Dorian when it was a Category 5 on the P-3. I only got on when it had, after it had sat over the Bahamas for 2 days and turned north. But I did fly through a Category 5 Irma in 2017, which hit very close to home for me because I spent a week chasing Irma, and then Irma came pretty much directly over my apartment in Lakeland, Florida.
Wow.
So sometimes they hunt back.
Well said.
Irma was the first really major storm that I flew as a full up crew member, and passing through, it's honestly like being on a wooden roller coaster that is inside of an automatic car wash. So there's a lot of vibration, and there's a lot of getting bounced around back and forth and forward and back. But then there's also just wind and rain and grapple and whatever else just slapping against the window. And then punching into the eye of really powerful storms like that, the Category 3s and above. It's incredible because you have just gone through sort of the worst weather that you can find on the planet. And then you end up in this big, beautiful bowl. And there's blue sky above you, and you leave the nasty gray storm clouds behind, and it's beautiful to look at. And that's why I always have a camera looking out the window, because the first time I saw it, I didn't have one, and I thought, wow, people should probably see this, because that would really drive home just how incredibly powerful and enormous these systems can be. But it's absolutely awe-inspiring. And the important thing to remember is that once you're in there, you have to get out. So not only do you get to fly through the eye wall once, but you get to do it several times, because on a typical mission, we're passing through usually 3 or 4 times over the course of that 8 hours. The most that I've ever done on a single flight was a Hurricane Florence flight in September of 2018. And we actually did 9 eye wall penetrations that day.
Gosh.
So that was 9 times in and out. We had the gas for it. So we were like, let's go.
Let's go.
And that had a lot of research value. So that was a good mission for us.
That's amazing. Wow. I think most people will wonder why. Like, why are you A, flying an aircraft that's 40 years old, and B, a prop engine aircraft to boot? So can you explain the reasons behind those decisions from NOAA? Yeah.
So the P-3s are about 45 years old at this point, but they're incredibly reliable aircraft. The P-3 was designed as a submarine hunting aircraft for the Navy. The 2 that we have weren't submarine hunters prior. They rolled off the assembly line and came directly to NOAA, and NOAA has taken incredibly good care of them. Like I said, we have excellent maintainers. I would argue some of the best that I have ever seen. And the reason that we use propeller aircraft to go through the storm, obviously Gonzo's a jet and flying up above and around and not really in the thick of it. But the reason we use propeller aircraft is that they can respond a lot quicker to the updrafts and downdrafts that we encounter as we're flying through the storm. So with a simple, push or pull of the power levers, if we see that our airspeed's starting to go up too high or we're starting to lose a little altitude, the flight engineer sitting up front can adjust the throttle and sort of reduce the stresses in the aircraft and keep us at the altitude that we want to and at the airspeed that we want to. And we're typically targeting 210 knots indicated as we fly through the storm. Obviously, there's some leeway there, but that's what we aim for. And so with jet engines, there's also concern that they'd get a little choked out because we certainly fly through incredibly heavy rains and grapple and all of those nasty things. And the turboprops can handle that stuff a little better. So
yeah, it's incredible that hardware is, it was built well, and maintained well, and they've served millions and millions of people, whether people know it or not. So that's pretty incredible. You've mentioned a little bit of, the crew makeup in these aircraft. What is the size of the crew, and kind of what's like a smattering of the job descriptions happening inside?
So on the P3s, and we'll just stick for P3s. The jet doesn't get enough love, and I'm very sorry, Gonzo, but people are really interested in the P3 crews. And so the P3 crews are typically in non-pandemic years about 12 to 15 people, and that usually includes 3 pilots, 2 flight engineers, a meteorologist, a navigator, a handful of engineers and technicians, and then a handful of scientists from the National Hurricane Center. And so everyone on the aircraft has a job to do. Sometimes we'll bring observers like news folks and whoever else, and VIPs and those kind of folks. But that's the core crew, the people who are there to really do, an important job on the aircraft. The pilots are obviously flying the aircraft, and they do an excellent job of it. A lot of our P3 pilots are former Navy folks, and so they've got a lot of experience under their belts. Our flight engineers, they're the folks operating the subsystems up front and operating the throttles in between the pilots, and they also work as mechanics on the aircraft, taking care of stuff. The navigator is helping out our flight director, who's our onboard meteorologist, to determine tracks, and they're working the radios and helping us stay in contact with folks. The flight director probably has the most important job, other than the pilot and the flight engineer on the aircraft, in that they keep us out of the nasty stuff. So we've got 3 radars on board, and 2 of those are really used for navigating throughout the storm. So we've got our lower fuselage radar that can see out for about 300 miles. And then we have our nose radar, which doesn't see as far, but can give us a little more fidelity. And so as we're approaching a storm, the flight director's looking at the storm on our radar and figuring out, all right, where are we going to try to go through this thing at? Because we're really not trying to find the most violent parts of the storm. We're trying to find the parts of the storm that we're going to be able to get through without getting our butts whooped.
Yeah.
And then once we're in the storm environment, they're even more focused on the radars, making sure that we're staying out of anything too cellular or anything that looks like hail or something like that. And so they're busy pretty much all of the time. Moving further back through the tube, we have usually an electronics technician who's operating our data systems and making sure that everything we're collecting is being collected accurately. And then we have an engineer in the back launching dropsondes and operating that specific data system. And then the scientists on board they are helping to do quality control on the data we're collecting, and also talking with folks back on the ground and make sure that the data that we're collecting gets to where it needs to go. And that's really the crew on the aircraft. And then, of course, we have the ground support team as well. So after we come back from a flight, that's where the ground maintainers come in, and they're taking a look out all around the aircraft, making sure nothing's broken, nothing's everything's where it should be, and making sure that it's still a good aircraft to go right back out. Because especially when there's a major storm, we are flying 24-hour operations. So we've got 2 crews usually taking the same airplane up and up and up and up and up.
So it's coming back, doing a maintenance check, refueling, and going back out.
Yep, that is how it works. And we'll do that for as many as 6 days in a row consecutively before we take a down day. And the down day is mandatory. That's in our policy because crew rest is incredibly important in the aviation world.
That's good to hear.
You did mention earlier that you have media folks join you guys sometimes. Is there a wait list for that? And do they have to go through some sort of testing to make sure they can handle it?
Certainly no testing required. I do know that there's if you want to get on the aircraft as a media person, you need to contact our public affairs folks who are not me. I do not have that kind of power. We're not really doing ride-alongs this year because we're still at reduced crewing because of the pandemic, trying to keep ourselves safe. Yeah. So, but next year maybe, if you're lucky and can talk to the right people who, again, are not me, you can find your way on.
Wink. Yeah.
There is no wink with that. Not me. It is not me.
Do some of these reporters or anyone who comes on to any sick stories? Yeah,
I mean, sometimes people do get motion sickness. Because, like I said earlier, it's like being on a wooden roller coaster, pretty much. Yeah. So if you can't handle roller coasters, you probably wouldn't like flying in a hurricane.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I can't even get on a swing. Yeah, so, that wouldn't work for me.
That means you're probably not going to make it as on the wait list there.
I'm cutting that part out. Yeah,
you'll have to lie on that portion of your application, and I'll know.
Yeah, you will. I have a question. What is a storm that you made one run through, and you came back, and then you went back, and it has grown in intensity rapidly? Does that make sense? Like what's a storm that jumps out where the intensity scale grew exponentially between times going out?
Storm that changed while we're flying it. A great example was, again, last year with Laura. So that storm, especially after it came off of the northwest coast of Cuba and got into the Gulf of Mexico, where the water was about 1 degree to 2 warmer, depending on where you were, that thing took off like a rocket because we found it as a Category 1 hurricane at 8 o'clock in the morning on a Tuesday. That sounds right. And then as we were flying that storm, the peak wind speeds in the eye wall just kept going up and up and up. And then the next mission, the following day that we flew, we found it as a Category 3 hurricane. And again, over the course of the 8 hours we were up there, just kept growing and growing and growing. And about 2 or 3 hours after we landed from that mission, where we found it as a Category 3 storm at 8 o'clock in the morning, about 2 hours after we landed, it had gone up to Category 4 intensity. And so
it's crazy.
Wow.
That storm did not have a lot slowing it down. It was pretty much everything environmentally for it was going for it. And it was certainly taking full advantage of that.
That's wild. I think one of the things you said that kind of is a little stunning is you were talking about Hurricane Laura, and it got over the Gulf that was 1 or 2 degrees warmer, and that's a substantial issue for hurricanes. I would think it would be 5-10 degrees warmer, but 1 or 2 that can flip it.
Yeah, and when people ask me, because that's something I always point out with Laura, or with a lot of these storms that rapidly intensify, and just with a lot of the storms in recent years, because I don't know if you know this, but the water has been observably warmer than it normally was. Normally, quotes.
Yeah.
But if it's 80 degrees outside versus 82 degrees outside, you don't really notice. You can't really tell the difference. But when you think about how temperature is just a representation of energy, and when you spread that energy over several hundred square miles, that's a lot of extra energy that's just in the ocean and there and available to be soaked up. So that's and from an engineering standpoint, I always think of this stuff in terms of energy transfer because it just makes sense to me. But
that helped. That actually makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of breathtaking to even begin to, as just for a lay person like me, to start to think of the volume of the Gulf. My brain isn't built that way to think of that, but just the energy storage at play is unbelievable. Yeah. Thinking about that too, switching a little bit, maybe from hurricanes, y'all also fly over the Arctic. And measure lots of different things. What's a brief overview of some missions that you're flying over the Arctic, and kind of what are some things that y'all are seeing? Obviously, from what you could tell, are maybe some trends happening in the Arctic right now?
Yeah. The one mission that I have actually supported, I haven't gone this year or last year, but I did between 2017 and 2019, was called Arctic Heat, which is a program that some scientists out of NOAA's Pacific Marine Environmental Laboratory are running. And they're looking at sea ice buildup rates in the Chukchi Sea, which is that area of the Arctic Ocean that is between Alaska and Russia. And they're interested in this area because oceanographically, it's a very interesting area. It's only about 50 meters deep across a lot of the shoals up there.
Wow.
But it's also been losing sea ice at a lot faster rate than the rest of the Arctic. So if you go online to the National Sea Ice or National Snow and Ice Data Center and you look at the sea ice extent plots from 1980 and compare them up to now, that area just really doesn't get sea ice like it used to. And so we're flying around dropping ocean sensing instruments. They're called AXBTs, or Airborne Expendable Bathythermographs, which is a really fancy way to say it's an ocean thermometer. And so we're flying around in our Twin Otter. We're dropping that. Those instruments, we're using radiometers. We're gathering a bunch of atmospheric and oceanographic data to sort of understand, why is there not as much sea ice as there used to be? And a lot of that has to do with temperatures are warmer in the Arctic, and the ocean temperature is warmer in the Arctic. And the bad thing with warmer water in the Arctic is that it's a feedback loop, because ice is a nice bright white color and it reflects solar energy really well, and blue dark ocean water absorbs solar energy really well. And so when you have less sea ice to reflect that solar energy, instead you have the dark blue ocean water, which absorbs more energy and heats up the water, which melts more ice, which reveals more water to absorb more solar energy, and you get in this feedback loop. And that's a lot of what we're seeing. And so even just between 2017 and 2019 and flying the missions up there, we had to, even though we were going at the same time of year, which was around the start of the summer in late May and early June, we had to operate further north in Alaska to actually get to the edge of the sea ice. And obviously that's a small sample size and there's a lot of variability in sea ice extent. But, just from what I was seeing and flying around with the scientists who have been up there for a long time, and you sort of see these areas that 40 years ago at that time of year were covered in sea ice. And now it's just, hundreds of square miles of open ocean now. And so it's sort of startling to see and startling to think about. And, obviously the topic of climate change is a really hot button thing these days. But what I find interesting about my position is that I'm on the forefront of a lot of stuff that is directly related to that. And my position on it is that it's absolutely happening, and I think we need to be well past that point of agreeing that something's going on and need to sort of get to, well, what do we do about it? And obviously my beliefs there are also in line with NOAA's. So, you can go to climate.gov and you can see that carbon dioxide levels are rising and sea surface temperatures are rising and temperatures across the globe are rising. And we've coupled that to a cause. And so if you want more information about that, and if you don't believe me and, the guy who has been up to the Arctic and saw, oh, well, yeah, there's not a lot of ice up here, less than you would expect, I guess. Then you can go there and do some learning yourself. And sorry to rant about that. I'm very passionate about that topic.
The data is there.
Yeah. With all of that kind of stuff and all of the dust that gets kicked up about stuff, I just try to keep my head down and stay focused on the good work that we're doing. And so whether it's hurricanes or whether it's climate change stuff in the Arctic or atmospheric river reconnaissance on the West Coast. The West Coast is in like the worst drought they've had in a very long time right now. And that's, part to do with a lot of stuff going on in the Pacific or not going on in the Pacific. Mm-hmm. But anyway, what I try to do, and I would say what my teammates really try to do, is just try to, look past all of that, stay focused on the work that we're doing, and keep focused on how important it is, and just make sure that we're conveying the message of the importance of the work that we're doing and how it relates to people and how it impacts their lives as effectively as possible. At the end of the day, no matter what anyone is saying on Twitter or on the news or whatever else, if there's a hurricane headed towards the United States, someone has to go fly that, and someone has to gather that data. And as we've talked about before, it's a somewhat dangerous job, and you've got to stay focused on what you're doing. So
that's good.
Yeah, that's good perspective. I think that's good philosophy generally for life, and for myself personally, I can get definitely sucked into the black hole. Absolutely. Well, Nick, I would be remiss to not end the interview on a topic that we touched on near the top, which is your potential journey to maybe being an astronaut someday. I mean, where are we there? Like, what's the feeling that you have of your trajectory, literally and figuratively?
My plan is that the next time there's an astronaut round to throw my name in the hat and see what comes of it. And if I don't make it then I'll wait for the next round and throw my name in the hat, and I'll probably keep throwing my name in the hat until either they finally accept me out of, well, this kid's just annoying, let's get him out of here, or let's get him up there so we can shut him up, or until, it's just, it's not going to pan out. And if it doesn't pan out, I've still made a wonderful career of doing what I can for the good people of my country and my communities, and I would have made an interesting life of it. So I'm happy where I'm at, and I'm happy to keep doing what I'm doing. And people say, "Oh, I love my job," and but I genuinely do love my job. I love the people that I get to work with. They're all smart and talented and interesting, and emphasis on the interesting sometimes. There's certainly some interesting people. But I love my coworkers, and I love the job that I get to do, and I love how many people I get to help. So, yeah. And that's my long-winded answer of
that's a great
when
answer.
Someone asks me, well, what are you going to do with, what are you doing down there?
So, yeah.
That's a great answer.
Well, we are rooting for you no matter what, man, because we're huge fans of yours and the work you're doing, and just how you communicate that, on social media. And I know you take the message of NOAA and the hurricane hunters in a lot of different places. And that's so cool. I think I was watching a little earlier, one of your classroom talks from the winter and on mm-hmm. YouTube. And that's a sweet thing that you're doing too, man. So we're rooting for you.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And yeah, I, 6 years ago, well, 6 years ago, I had applied for this job and I knew about it, but 7 years ago, I didn't know that hurricane hunters were a thing. Like I had no clue. And now, I'm 5 years into it, and it's hard to imagine doing anything else. So the more kids we can talk to and get excited about science and aviation and whatever else, the better. And the more folks listening at home that, we can talk to and explain the mission that we do and how it impacts their lives and their families and their communities, and sort of, kick up that appreciation for what NOAA and the rest of the good civil servants across the federal government do for them, the better. And
that's wonderful.
I'm happy and thrilled to play a part in that, even if it is just me tweeting dumb jokes on Twitter about whatever. We all have a part to play.
We all have a part to play.
We need astronauts who have a meme vocabulary. 100%.
Yeah.
100%.
I can provide that. NASA, if you're listening, have we got the boy for you?
Truly. Sending memes on the way to Mars. Yeah, that's
yes,
for sure what we need. Absolutely. Man. Well, Nick Underwood, thank you so much for your time and for joining us on the Tornado Trackers podcast. This was just a fabulous conversation and just endlessly fascinating.
And thank you for everything that you do as a hurricane hunter, and extend that to your crew. Obviously, as storm chasers, we definitely use the information, but the general public, whether they know it or not, you guys keep them safe. And so thank you for your service and everything that you're doing up there.
That's right.
Thank you. I'll relay the message.
And Nick, where can people find you online if they want to follow you?
You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at the Astro Nick. And if you want some stickers, you can usually send a nice DM and I'll maybe send some stickers your way. Or if you just want to drop by and say hi, I try to answer everyone that I can. And, I'll be sure to post some interesting imagery and videos and memes probably from this upcoming hurricane season. So we'll see what we get into.
That's great.
People, what more reason do you need? Follow Nick everywhere. He's gonna send you stickers. Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for joining us on another episode of the Tornado Trackers podcast. And yeah, you can find us everywhere online at Tornado Trackers. But I want to let you in on a secret. We are moving our very, very, very best footage and best quality footage to our Patreon. That's just a decision we needed to make for ourselves to recoup some costs of storm chasing and of podcasting and things like that. So it would mean a ton to us if you would consider kicking a couple bucks or $5 or $10 a month our way. Seriously, from the bottom of our hearts, would mean the world to us. And you're going to get a ton of great stuff as well on our Patreon. And it really helps us out. As well. So thank you all so much for considering joining our Patreon there. Well, that's all we've got for this week's episode of the Tornado Trackers podcast. Thank you so much again to Nick Underwood for joining us, and we will catch y'all in a couple weeks. See ya.